there comes a moment when sound begins to feel unreliable. Not gone, not silent, just incomplete. Words arrive missing their edges. Conversations require more effort than they used to. And slowly, almost without noticing, a person may begin to step back, not because they want to be alone, but because listening has become work. Many people do not realize how deeply hearing is tied to identity. For most of life, conversation is effortless. Voices blend into the background of daily living. Laughter floats through rooms. Instructions are absorbed without strain. There is no need to think about listening. It simply happens. When that ease begins to change, the shift is subtle. It does not announce itself with silence. Instead, it shows up as small gaps, a sentence that needs repeating, a name that sounds unfamiliar, a joke that lands a second too late. At first, these moments feel harmless. Everyone misses things now and then. Everyone asks for repetition occasionally. But over time, the effort required to keep up quietly increases. The brain works harder to fill in missing sounds. Context becomes a crutch. Facial expressions are watched more closely. Attention sharpens not out of interest but necessity. And because the change is gradual, it is easy to adapt without acknowledging what is happening. Adaptation is a strength. Seniors have adapted their entire lives to work, to family, to loss, to change. Adjusting to hearing differences feels like just another adaptation, something to manage privately, something not worth mentioning. So many people begin to compensate instead of communicate. They nod along when unsure. They smile politely when words blur together. They laugh when others laugh, even if the reason is unclear. These small acts protect social smoothness. They prevent embarrassment. They keep interactions moving forward, but they also come at a cost. Each moment of pretending to understand adds a layer of distance. Not dramatic distance, but quiet separation. The kind that accumulates slowly. Over time, conversations feel more draining. Group settings feel overwhelming. Background noise becomes exhausting, and without making a conscious decision, a person may begin to withdraw. Not fully, not obviously, but just enough to feel safer. This withdrawal is often misunderstood, even by the person experiencing it. It may be explained as fatigue, as preference for quiet, as a desire for peace. And while all of those can be true, they sometimes mask something else. The effort of listening has begun to outweigh the joy of connection. Avoiding conversations does not usually come from disinterest in people. It comes from the desire to avoid strain, to avoid the vulnerability of asking for repetition, to avoid the fear of misunderstanding something important, to avoid the subtle shame that can arise when communication no longer feels effortless. This is not a failure, it is a human response. But hearing changes do not mean conversation must disappear. They mean conversation must change shape. Confidence in communication does not come from perfect hearing. It comes from permission to adjust, to clarify, to participate differently without apology. The first step toward that confidence is recognizing that avoidance is not protection. It is a signal that something needs to be approached with care rather than sidestepped. Listening differently does not diminish dignity. It preserves it. As hearing changes, the environment becomes louder in unexpected ways. Background sounds that once faded away now compete for attention. A television in the next room, dishes clinking in the kitchen, air conditioning humming softly. These sounds blur together, making voices harder to separate. In group conversations, this effect multiplies. Multiple voices overlap. Words are spoken quickly. Laughter erupts suddenly. For someone whose hearing has changed, this can feel like trying to follow a conversation in a foreign language familiar, yet just out of reach. The mind responds by working harder. It predicts what might be said. It fills in gaps based on context. It guesses. This mental effort is invisible to others, but it is exhausting. After a social gathering, fatigue sets in not from talking, but from listening. Because this fatigue is internal, it is often misinterpreted. A person may believe they are becoming less social, less patient, less interested. In reality, they are simply tired from constant effort. Avoidance begins as self-care, choosing quieter environments, spending time alone to recover, declining invitations that feel too demanding. These choices make sense in the moment. They provide relief, but when avoidance becomes the default, something essential is lost. Connection, spontaneity, the small everyday interactions that give life texture. Confidence does not mean forcing oneself into uncomfortable situations. It means reshaping those situations so they are supportive rather than draining. It means understanding that participation can look different without being lesser. Many seniors fear that acknowledging hearing difficulty will change how others see them. They worry about being treated differently, about being pitied, about being excluded from decisions or conversations. These fears are understandable. Society often equates hearing loss with decline. But hearing differences are not a measure of intelligence, relevance, or capability. They are simply a change in how information enters the mind. Avoiding conversation to hide hearing difficulty may feel protective, but it often reinforces the very fears it is meant to prevent. Distance grows. Assumptions form. Others may mistake quietness for disinterest. Invitations may slow, not out of cruelty, but misunderstanding. Speaking up gently, confidently interrupts that cycle. Confidence begins with small shifts. Asking someone to face you when speaking, choosing seating that reduces background noise, letting others know that clarity matters more than speed. These adjustments do not demand special treatment. They create mutual understanding. Conversation is not a performance. It is a shared effort. When that effort is acknowledged, pressure eases. There is no need to pretend, no need to guess, no need to withdraw. Participation becomes possible again, not because hearing has improved, but because communication has been reshaped. Listening is not only about ears, it is about presence, about intention, about willingness to engage even when conditions are imperfect. Confidence grows when a person realizes that their value in conversation does not depend on catching every word. It depends on showing up honestly, and honesty offered calmly invites connection rather than closing it off. As this understanding settles, the focus shifts from what has been lost to what can still be built. New habits, new rhythms, new ways of staying connected without strain. Hearing may not return to what it once was, but conversation does not need to disappear with it. It only needs room to evolve. That evolution begins not with technology or solutions, but with mindset, with the quiet decision that connection is worth adjusting for. That dignity is not found in silence, but in participation on one's own terms. And once that decision is made, the path forward becomes clearer, not louder, but steadier. As confidence begins to replace avoidance, another truth quietly emerges. Most conversations do not fail because of hearing loss itself, but because expectations remain unchanged. People continue speaking at the same pace, in the same environments, with the same assumptions about how sound is received. When those assumptions are gently adjusted, communication improves, not dramatically, but meaningfully. Many seniors discover that when they explain their needs calmly, others respond with care, not always perfectly, but often with willingness. A friend slows down slightly. A family member repeats something without frustration. A cashier speaks more clearly when asked. These small accommodations are not burdens. They are acts of respect that most people are glad to offer once they understand what is needed. The difficulty is that asking still feels uncomfortable. It can feel like an admission, like a disruption, like drawing attention to something private. Years of self-reliance make it hard to request help, even small help, and because hearing changes are invisible, they are easy to minimize. But communication is not a one-sided responsibility. It is shared, just as others adjust when someone uses a cane or glasses. Adjusting speech is simply another form of cooperation. It does not change relationships, it strengthens them. Many people are surprised to find that once they speak up, Tension decreases. The mental effort of guessing disappears. The fear of misunderstanding fades. Conversations feel lighter. Shorter interactions become more satisfying because they no longer require constant vigilance. Confidence grows not from perfection, but from relief. Another shift that supports confidence is choosing environments intentionally. Not every setting is equally friendly to conversation. Loud restaurants, echoing rooms, and crowded gatherings can overwhelm even those with excellent hearing. For seniors with hearing changes, these environments can feel especially taxing. Avoiding them entirely can lead to isolation, but modifying how and when they are approached can preserve connection without exhaustion. Meeting friends during quieter hours, choosing seats away from speakers or kitchens, suggesting walks or smaller gatherings. These choices are not limitations, they are strategies. When seniors take ownership of their comfort, they reclaim control. Instead of declining invitations, they shape them. Instead of enduring discomfort, they create conditions for success. This approach also reduces frustration on both sides. When communication flows more easily, patience increases. Laughter returns. Moments feel shared again, not strained. Another powerful source of confidence is preparation. Knowing one's own patterns what makes hearing easier. What makes it harder allows for anticipation rather than reaction. If background noise is challenging, arriving early before crowds gather can help. If fatigue increases difficulty, scheduling conversations earlier in the day may feel better. These adjustments are quiet. They do not require explanation. They simply support participation. Technology can also play a role, but it is not the foundation of confidence. Devices may assist, but confidence comes from how a person chooses to engage. Technology works best when paired with self-awareness and communication. Some seniors worry that using hearing aids or assistive devices will make them appear older or less capable. In reality, these tools often reduce visible struggle. They allow conversations to proceed more naturally, and as with glasses, their presence quickly becomes unremarkable. What matters most is not how hearing is supported, but how the person feels while participating. Confidence grows when effort decreases, when connection feels rewarding again rather than draining. As these changes take root, another fear often surfaces, the fear of being misunderstood, not because of hearing, but because of responses. When words are misheard, replies may seem off. This can feel embarrassing. It can lead to self-doubt. The solution is not withdrawal. It is transparency, saying, "I might have missed that. Can you say it again?" prevents misalignment before it grows. It signals care, not incompetence. Most people appreciate this honesty. It reassures them that their words matter. It prevents assumptions. It keeps conversation aligned. Over time, these small practices rebuild trust, not just with others, but with oneself. The fear of social situations softens. The anticipation of strain fades. Confidence replaces caution, and with confidence comes freedom. The freedom to stay engaged, to express opinions, to share stories, to laugh without anxiety. Hearing clearly is not the requirement for meaningful conversation. Being present is. As presence becomes easier, attention turns to something deeper, identity. Many seniors quietly worry that hearing changes will alter who they are in the eyes of others, that they will be seen as less sharp, less involved, less relevant. These fears are powerful. They can shape behavior more strongly than physical limitations, but they are also based on outdated ideas about aging and ability. Identity is not determined by sensory input. It is shaped by values, experience, perspective, and voice. Hearing differences do not erase these qualities. Silence does. When seniors remain engaged, ask questions, share insights, and participate on their own terms, their identity remains intact. Often, it becomes more visible. Others recognize wisdom, humor, and depth that might have been missed before. Confidence in conversation is not about dominating or keeping up. It is about contributing meaningfully. And contribution does not require perfect hearing. It requires intention. As this understanding settles, the final shift becomes possible, moving from coping to thriving. From managing hearing challenges to living fully with them, that shift is not loud. It does not announce itself. It simply feels like ease returning, like connection becoming natural again. And that ease, once reclaimed, becomes a source of quiet pride, not because hearing has improved, but because confidence has. As ease settles back into daily exchanges, something else begins to change quietly: the way silence is experienced. Silence no longer feels like an enemy waiting to expose a missed word. It becomes a pause, a breath, a space where thoughts gather before being shared. This shift alone can transform how conversations feel from the inside. Many seniors discover that when they stop bracing themselves against every sound, they start listening differently, not just to words but to tone, rhythm, and expression. Faces become more meaningful. Gestures carry weight. Meaning is no longer carried by sound alone. It is shared across the whole moment. This kind of listening is not a loss, it is an expansion. People often underestimate how much communication has always been nonverbal. Long before hearing changes appear, understanding has relied on context, familiarity, and emotion. As hearing evolves, these elements simply move closer to the surface. Seniors who allow themselves to lean into them often feel more connected, not less. There is also a subtle emotional benefit. When the pressure to catch everything eases, anxiety drops. The mind is no longer racing to fill gaps or anticipate misunderstandings. That mental quiet allows for presence, and presence is what others feel most strongly in conversation. This presence often surprises family members and friends. They notice a calmness, a steadiness, a warmth that was previously overshadowed by tension. Conversations feel less hurried, more intentional. Even brief exchanges feel meaningful. Confidence at this stage no longer comes from pretending nothing has changed. It comes from integrating change into daily life without apology. Another quiet transformation happens in self-talk. Seniors who once criticized themselves for missing words or asking for repetition begin to speak to themselves with more kindness. They recognize that hearing changes are not failures, but variations. They stop measuring themselves against younger versions and start honoring who they are now. This internal shift is powerful. It shapes how the world is met. When self-judgment fades, courage grows. Social invitations feel less daunting. Phone calls feel more manageable. Even unfamiliar situations feel approachable again. The world does not shrink when hearing changes are acknowledged. It expands when avoidance is replaced with adaptation. There is also a deeper peace that emerges when conversations are no longer avoided. Isolation often begins quietly, justified by comfort or convenience. One declined invitation becomes another. One missed call goes unanswered. Over time, silence fills the spaces where a connection once lived. Re-entering conversation interrupts that drift. Even small interactions, a chat with a neighbor, a call to a friend, a shared meal anchor, a sense of belonging. They remind seniors that they are still part of the rhythm of life, not observing it from the sidelines. Belonging is not dependent on perfect hearing. It depends on participation. As seniors reclaim their place in conversations, they often rediscover joy in sharing stories. Stories do not require speed or precision. They unfold at their own pace. They allow for repetition, laughter, pauses. They invite others in. Telling stories restores authority. It affirms experience. It places the speaker in a role of contributor, not receiver. Hearing differences do not diminish this role. In many ways, they enhance it by encouraging slower, richer exchange. This is where confidence becomes deeply rooted, not in technique, but in identity. A senior who knows their value does not measure themselves by how many words they catch. They measure themselves by the meaning they bring, by the attention they offer, by the presence they hold. As this understanding settles, conversations stop being tests to pass and start being moments to inhabit. The final truth is gentle but important. Hearing clearly is not the same as being heard. Many people with excellent hearing go unseen and unheard because they do not engage authentically. Many seniors with hearing challenges are deeply heard because they show up with openness and confidence. Avoiding conversations protects no one. It only delays connection. Choosing to engage, even imperfectly, protects dignity, independence, and emotional health. Later in life, confidence is not loud. It is steady. It does not demand attention. It earns respect through calm presence. When seniors stop avoiding conversations and start approaching them on their own terms, they do more than adapt to hearing changes. They redefine what confidence looks like. It looks like asking for what you need without shame. It looks like shaping environments instead of withdrawing from them. It looks like trusting your value even when conditions change. It looks like staying connected, and that connection, once reclaimed, becomes one of the most powerful forms of well-being available.